A single bullet shattered Emily's world forever. Her best friend Bailey, a rare chocolate Labrador with piercing blue eyes, lay lifeless at her feet. Her father Liam, a legendary former Delta Force commander haunted by past mistakes, stood frozen in shock. Why did a young officer pull the trigger? And what hidden past connects Liam to this tragedy? Stay tuned, because the truth about this heartbreaking night might just redefine the meaning of forgiveness. Emily Brooks sat alone beneath the sprawling oak tree in the backyard, her small frame partially hidden among tall blades of sunlit grass. She was 11, slender and petite, her delicate features framed by soft chestnut hair that cascaded in gentle waves just past her shoulders. Her large green eyes, always thoughtful, seemed older than her years, marked by a sorrow too deep for someone so young. Emily wore an oversized blue sweater that once belonged to her mother, Olivia. The sweater still carried Olivia's subtle scent, a soothing blend of lavender and honey, something Emily clung to as tightly as her fading memories. The small town in North Carolina where Emily lived was known for its quiet charm, the type of place where neighbors smiled warmly and waved each time they passed by, yet whispered in sympathetic tones behind closed doors. Emily often heard their hushed conversations, usually something like, "Poor girl, losing her mother so young. It must be so hard." She had grown accustomed to the sympathetic glances, but the ache in her heart never eased. Her mother, Olivia Brooks, had been a woman loved by everyone who knew her, a gentle spirit with kind brown eyes and wavy dark brown hair that matched Emily's. Olivia was a teacher whose warmth could comfort even the rowdiest classroom. She taught Emily kindness, compassion, and the power of forgiveness through stories written down lovingly in her journals. Cancer had stolen Olivia away a year ago, leaving a void in Emily's life so profound she'd become quiet, reserved, and withdrawn, speaking rarely even to her father. Liam Brooks, Emily's father, was a man admired by many, though few truly knew him. At 42, he carried himself with quiet strength and authority, his rugged appearance softened slightly by emerging streaks of grey in his short, dark hair. His piercing blue eyes had witnessed horrors only soldiers knew. Liam was a former Delta Force commander, a decorated war hero who chose to retire prematurely, giving up his promising military career after Olivia's passing to dedicate his time fully to Emily. Yet, despite his efforts, he struggled to breach the silence that had grown between them. His days were now defined by attempts at fatherhood rather than by commands on battlefields, and the adjustment had been painful and challenging. As Emily sat, lost in thought beneath the oak, a rustling nearby drew her attention. From around the side of the house bounded Bailey, her one true companion in this world. Bailey was no ordinary dog. He was a 2-year-old chocolate Labrador retriever, strikingly unique for his deep, velvety chocolate coat and brilliant, almost hypnotic blue eyes, a rarity that always turned heads. His fur glistened in the sunlight, his sturdy build balanced by graceful movements as he bounded toward Emily with enthusiasm. His expressive eyes seemed wise beyond their years, full of unconditional love and empathy. Bailey had been a gift from Olivia 2 months before she died. She had told Emily, "Take good care of him, sweetheart. He'll be your friend when things get tough." Emily hadn't fully understood then, but now Bailey was indeed her best friend, her comforter, her confidant. His warm body pressing gently against hers whenever she felt lonely had become her greatest source of solace. "Hey, Bailey," Emily murmured, her voice barely above a whisper as she buried her fingers deep into his soft coat. Bailey responded by leaning his head affectionately into her shoulder, a silent gesture that spoke louder than words. Tears pricked Emily's eyes, but she held them back, drawing comfort from his presence. From the back porch, Liam watched the tender exchange silently. He stood tall, broad-shouldered and powerful in build, his faded jeans and simple grey t-shirt failing to conceal the trained muscles of a lifelong soldier. Liam's expression softened as he observed his daughter, sadness settling across his rugged face. He wished desperately he could reach her, to understand her pain better, but his own grief was still fresh, raw. It sometimes felt easier to retreat into solitude, a habit formed from years spent hiding emotions in the line of duty. "Emily," Liam called gently, stepping down the porch steps with careful hesitation. "Would you like some lunch?" Emily glanced back, her gaze shy yet tender. "I'm okay, Dad. Maybe later?" Liam nodded slowly, offering her a small, reassuring smile. He was a man used to direct orders, missions, and actions, but this was new territory, raising a grieving daughter alone. "All right, honey. I'll be inside if you need anything," he replied softly, retreating back into the house, carrying with him the weight of feeling inadequate. Emily turned back to Bailey, who seemed to sense her melancholy mood. He nudged her playfully, his bright eyes sparkling with mischief, encouraging her to smile. She laughed softly despite herself, brushing away tears that had finally escaped. For Emily, Bailey was a lifeline, an anchor that kept her tethered to hope, to love. His companionship was silent yet profound, understanding without judgment or condition. The afternoon sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the yard as Emily lay back on the grass, her small hand resting on Bailey's warm flank. She stared up into the blue expanse of the sky, watching soft, billowy clouds drift slowly, carrying away her sadness bit by bit. Bailey sighed contentedly beside her, his gentle breathing matching her own heartbeat. "Do you think Mum can see us now, Bailey?" Emily whispered, a question she'd often wondered, but never voiced to anyone else. Bailey raised his head slightly, looking into her eyes as if comprehending every word. He nuzzled closer, offering his quiet reassurance. Emily felt a warmth in her chest, a small, fragile spark of healing and hope. She gently stroked Bailey's fur, comforted by the simple rhythm. They remained together beneath the oak tree, neither needing words. Their friendship was one forged through sorrow, yet strengthened by unspoken understanding. Emily knew she had lost much, but as long as Bailey remained by her side, she knew she was not alone. Unbeknownst to her, from the window inside the house, Liam continued to watch, his heart aching yet reassured. He hoped someday soon he might find a way to break through their shared silence, to rebuild their lives into something brighter, something that would honor Olivia's memory. But for now, beneath the sheltering branches of the old oak tree, Emily and Bailey shared a bond that no words could ever fully capture, a friendship beyond words. Night had fallen quietly upon the sleepy town, bringing with it a stillness disturbed only by the distant murmur of crickets. The stars glittered faintly in a dark velvet sky, lending a false sense of peace. On the edge of town, not far from Liam Brooks's modest two-story house, sat Martha Perkins, a woman in her mid-60s who lived alone. Martha was a petite figure, slightly hunched by age, her hair a thin, silvery white bun, tightly pinned atop her head. A naturally anxious woman, Martha's large hazel eyes often seemed perpetually widened with worry. Her nervous disposition had grown significantly worse since her husband passed away unexpectedly 2 years earlier, and the loneliness left her prone to misinterpreting shadows and distant sounds. This particular night, her heightened nerves had been stirred by a series of rustlings and whispers she imagined coming from the direction of Liam's backyard. Peeking through her lace-curtained window, she thought she saw the vague silhouette of someone pacing suspiciously along the fence. Fearful and trembling, Martha reached for her phone and dialed 911, convinced someone sinister lurked nearby. Across town, at the small brick police station, Caleb Mason was nearing the end of his shift. At 25 years old, Caleb was still adjusting to the responsibilities of his newly assigned patrol duties. Tall and lean, with short, sandy blonde hair cropped close and earnest brown eyes, Caleb had a youthful face, one that often made townsfolk question whether he was truly old enough for such a serious job. He had been a bright student at the police academy, sincere and eager to serve, though his lack of real-world experience was evident. His idealism was tempered by frequent anxiety, especially in tense situations. It didn't help that he felt the heavy burden of expectation on his shoulders. His late father, Samuel Mason, had been a respected military hero, a reputation Caleb struggled to live up to each day. He was deep in thought, sitting behind the wheel of his patrol car, when the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. "Officer Mason, report of a possible intruder near the Brooks residence. Caller believes there's suspicious activity. Proceed with caution." Caleb straightened in his seat, adrenaline surging through him. He replied with a steady voice masking his inner nerves. "Copy that. En route." Minutes later, Caleb parked discreetly several houses away, stepping cautiously from his car into the cool night air. The streetlights cast soft yellow halos onto the sidewalks, creating patches of eerie brightness that contrasted starkly with pools of shadow between the houses. His pulse quickened as he approached Liam's property, aware, as everyone was, of Liam's formidable reputation. He had never met the man face to face, though stories of Liam's heroic exploits were well known. Caleb gripped his flashlight tightly, stepping lightly toward the backyard. As he reached the side gate, a sudden sound startled him. Footsteps rapidly approaching, breaking twigs and rustling bushes. His breath quickened, his grip tightening instinctively around his sidearm. "Police, identify yourself!" Caleb called sharply, his voice strained. The rustling grew louder, nearer, emerging abruptly from darkness. A swift blur of movement, a pair of shining, reflective blue eyes, bounding rapidly toward him. Before he fully processed the situation, panic overwhelmed Caleb's judgment. The shadow charging him appeared menacing in the dim moonlight, triggering a primal instinct for self-preservation. Without another moment's hesitation, he drew his gun, aimed, and fired a single shot into the darkness. A sharp, anguished yelp pierced the night air, quickly replaced by an unbearable silence. Caleb's heart stopped as the enormity of what had just occurred sunk in. His flashlight shakily illuminated the now lifeless body of Bailey, his rich chocolate fur glistening with blood, the beautiful blue eyes that had terrified Caleb moments earlier now vacant and still. The horrifying reality hit Caleb like a physical blow. He had shot a dog, not an intruder. Inside the house, Emily jolted awake at the unmistakable sound of the gunshot. Fear gripping her chest, she rushed downstairs. Liam close behind, alert and tense, protective instincts immediately activated. Liam emerged first through the front door, stopping abruptly at the sight before him. Emily stumbled out next, a small, frail figure trembling behind her father's imposing frame. Both froze simultaneously as they registered the heartbreaking image illuminated by Caleb's flashlight. Emily's scream shattered the silence, raw and filled with unbearable anguish. She rushed forward, collapsing beside Bailey's still form, tears pouring freely down her cheeks. Liam stood paralyzed, stunned by the cruel scene, his mind momentarily blank, before anger surged through him, a deep, familiar rage tempered only by his desperate instinct to shield his daughter from more pain. He stared at Caleb, a look filled with contempt and disbelief. Caleb stepped backward, shaking, unable to find words. I didn't know, I thought—" he stammered helplessly, voice breaking with emotion. Liam's jaw tightened as he finally spoke, voice low and heavy with barely controlled fury. "Get off my property. Now." Caleb recoiled as though struck, backing away numbly as other neighbors began to gather, attracted by Emily's cries and the echo of the gunshot. Caleb felt their judgmental stares searing into him, already feeling the weight of their accusations and condemnation. Within hours, news of the incident had spread across town, igniting heated arguments among neighbors. Some, empathized with Caleb's tragic mistake, arguing that in the dark he had reacted understandably to perceived danger. Others, however, passionately condemned his actions, accusing him of incompetence and carelessness, declaring his lack of experience had turned deadly. At the local diner the next morning, residents fiercely debated the events over cups of coffee and plates of eggs. Nancy Hargrove, a woman in her early 50s with dyed auburn hair and a loud, outspoken manner, loudly insisted Caleb should lose his badge immediately. Opposite her sat Michael Dunbar, a calm, soft-spoken older man with a neatly trimmed white beard, gently pleading that Caleb deserved compassion and understanding. The town was rapidly dividing into two camps, the controversy escalating, fueled by grief for Bailey and lingering respect for Liam's sacrifices as a veteran. Back at home, Emily sat curled up on the living room couch, eyes red-rimmed and swollen. Liam knelt beside her, feeling utterly helpless, aching to soothe her pain but uncertain how. He was haunted by his own grief, worsened by guilt at having failed to protect his daughter from yet another loss. Emily clutched tightly to Bailey's collar, refusing to let it go, as though it alone could hold the memories that were now slipping through her fingers. Her silent sorrow tore at Liam, deepening his own inner torment. He knew this tragedy had already scarred Emily permanently, forever altering her innocence. As Liam comforted his grieving daughter through that long, painful night, a storm of anger, sadness, and helplessness swirled within him. He was a man who had faced death countless times, had lost comrades, and had made difficult decisions in impossible situations, yet nothing had prepared him for this moment. The unbearable sight of his child's heartbreak and the knowledge that nothing he could do would bring back the companion she loved so dearly. The days following Bailey's tragic death brought a lingering, oppressive silence to the Brooks household, a heavy cloud of grief hanging over every room, every moment, every exchange of glances between father and daughter. Liam struggled profoundly, caught in the turbulent collision between overwhelming anger and deep sorrow, emotions he had not faced so fiercely since his days on the battlefield. Memories from his military past flooded his mind, images vivid and unrelenting, flashes of desert warfare, the deafening noise of gunfire, the anguished cries of wounded comrades. His nights became haunted once more, filled with recurring nightmares that woke him in cold sweats, heart pounding, eyes wide open, yet still seeing visions of loss and regret. Liam knew he had to shield Emily from the storm within him, masking his turmoil behind carefully constructed composure during the day, though his facade was slowly cracking under the strain of sleepless nights and relentless memories. Emily, already heartbroken by the loss of Bailey, withdrew further into solitude, spending hours in her room, silent and distant, clutching Bailey's collar like a precious lifeline. Liam could see her grief mirrored in her eyes, those wide, thoughtful green eyes, so like Olivia's, filled now with an unbearable sadness that wounded him deeply. Determined to maintain strength for her, Liam redirected his simmering rage into an obsessive need for answers. He found himself increasingly fixated on Caleb Mason, driven by a desire to understand exactly who this young officer was and why he had reacted so impulsively. Liam's methodical mind, shaped by years of military discipline and strategy, sought clarity through investigation, convinced there must be something deeper beneath Caleb's seemingly senseless action. Driven by this compulsion, Liam began to quietly inquire about Caleb's past, discreetly contacting old acquaintances in town who might know more. It was during one such encounter at the local hardware store that Liam spoke with Jake Tanner, an older man nearing 70, whose thinning grey hair and lined face told stories of years spent laboring outdoors. Jake had lived his entire life in town, observing quietly from his position behind the register, always friendly, trustworthy, and prone to discreetly sharing local histories. Liam, tall and imposing, standing awkwardly among shelves of gardening supplies and tools, questioned Jake carefully about Caleb. Jake's response revealed the young officer as someone deeply burdened by his father's legacy. Samuel Mason had been a decorated soldier, respected throughout the community, whose tragic death in combat had deeply scarred Caleb from childhood. Samuel's untimely passing had left Caleb desperate to honor his father's memory, yet equally terrified of failing to live up to the high standards set before him. Jake described Caleb as kind-hearted but perpetually nervous, a boy constantly overshadowed by the ghosts of his father's heroism. Hearing this, Liam felt a jolt of familiarity and guilt, a recognition of shared pain and the heavy burden of expectation that now haunted Caleb just as it haunted Liam himself. Meanwhile, Caleb's mental state was rapidly deteriorating, exacerbated by relentless public criticism and isolation. Every morning he woke to hateful messages on social media, anonymous letters left at his door accusing him of heartlessness, or whispered accusations whenever he stepped outside. The crushing weight of the community's judgment drove him to lock himself away, rarely leaving his small apartment on the outskirts of town. During one of his rare outings to the supermarket, Caleb encountered Judy Watkins, a fiercely outspoken woman in her mid-40s, whose short, dark hair, sharp facial features, and piercing gaze made her intimidating to many. Judy, known for her activism in animal rights, confronted Caleb openly in the grocery aisle, accusing him of reckless cruelty, loud enough to draw stares from other shoppers. Humiliated and unable to defend himself, Caleb quickly left his groceries behind, fleeing to the solitude of his home, his anxiety spiking uncontrollably. As weeks passed, Liam's emotional state worsened, nightmares blending into waking hallucinations, shadowy figures appearing briefly at the edge of his vision. Despite these struggles, Liam made concerted efforts to appear composed whenever Emily was near. He spoke softly, carefully choosing comforting words, hoping to ease her sorrow, even as his own pain intensified. His appearance grew increasingly haggard, deep lines forming around his eyes, his posture subtly more stooped with fatigue and suppressed emotions. The routine and discipline that had once stabilized his life in the military became meaningless as he grappled with the dual grief of losing both Olivia and Bailey. The burden of failing to protect Emily from harm tore at him, reawakening self-doubt buried beneath years of service and heroics. In an attempt to find solace, Liam visited Reverend Marcus Collins, the local pastor of a small church at the heart of the community. Reverend Collins, a tall, dignified man nearing 60, carried himself with quiet authority. His short, neatly combed silver hair and gentle, compassionate grey eyes projected kindness and wisdom. Marcus had counseled countless townspeople through difficult times, his calm demeanor often bringing comfort and guidance to those in turmoil. Sitting in the serene silence of the empty church pews, Liam finally opened up about his struggles, his overwhelming guilt, his nightmares, and his growing inability to suppress his rage and grief. Reverend Collins listened patiently, offering understanding without judgment. He encouraged Liam to confront his past openly, to find reconciliation within himself and extend compassion to Caleb. Liam left the church deeply unsettled but also determined to consider Marcus's wise counsel. That night, Liam sat alone at his kitchen table, nursing a cup of bitter black coffee, wrestling internally with memories that refused to rest. He vividly recalled a mission years earlier, one that had ended disastrously, costing several lives, including Samuel Mason's. Liam had made difficult decisions under immense pressure, choices that had haunted him ever since. He wondered bitterly if Caleb somehow blamed him for his father's death, wondered if this tragedy had been an unconscious act of revenge, a cruel twist orchestrated by fate. He shook the thought away, recognizing it as paranoia born from grief and exhaustion. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility. Perhaps, he thought, His inability to let go of guilt from Samuel's death had somehow indirectly led to Bailey's tragic fate. As Liam battled these dark thoughts, upstairs Emily lay awake, staring into the darkness, clutching tightly to Bailey's collar. She sensed her father's struggle, despite his attempts to hide it. The silence in their home was deafening, filled with unspoken pain and questions neither could yet voice aloud. Emily knew her father carried immense burdens he would never openly share, and although her own heart remained heavy with loss, she quietly resolved to find some small way to help him heal. In the depths of night, father and daughter, though physically separated by walls of grief, remained united by their shared, silent determination to overcome the tragedies that had befallen their small family. The chapter closed quietly, leaving unanswered questions hanging heavily in the air. Could Liam truly confront his past and find peace? Would Caleb survive the overwhelming scrutiny and guilt? And would this tragedy, which had begun as a cruel misunderstanding, ultimately destroy or somehow strengthen their small, wounded community? The answers remained elusive, hidden within the darkness of the restless night. Days passed in slow succession, each blending into the next, as Liam Brooks found himself consumed by an obsessive search for clarity. The tragic events involving Bailey haunted his every waking moment, compelling him to delve deeper into Caleb Mason's life, in hopes of uncovering a rationale behind the devastating mistake. Liam spent countless hours poring through old documents, calling former military contacts, and quietly revisiting long-buried records from his past. His home office, a small room dimly lit by a solitary desk lamp, now resembled a detective's workspace, cluttered with scattered papers, faded photographs, and hastily scribbled notes. One particular evening, as he thumbed through a worn photo album from his military days, Liam's finger froze over a group photo taken nearly 15 years prior. Standing next to him in full combat gear was a soldier named Samuel Mason, a tall, broad-shouldered man with rugged features, sandy blonde hair, and clear, unwavering brown eyes. Liam vividly recalled Samuel's easygoing personality, a quiet, dependable soldier respected by all his comrades. Samuel Mason had been brave, loyal, and well-liked. His death, a painful chapter Liam had tried unsuccessfully to bury deep within his memory. But what now drew Liam's attention was something he'd never truly registered before. Samuel Mason's young son, a small boy with innocent eyes and tousled sandy blonde hair, standing shyly beside his father in a candid photograph tucked inside the album's sleeve. Liam's heart sank with a sudden realization that chilled him to his core. That boy, smiling softly next to his proud father, was unmistakably Caleb Mason, the officer responsible for Bailey's death. The connection slammed into Liam like a physical blow, forcing air from his lungs, leaving him reeling in stunned disbelief. Caleb Mason was Samuel Mason's son, Samuel, whose death Liam had always known was ultimately due to his own flawed command decisions. His breathing quickened, his pulse thundered in his ears, memories and emotions flooding uncontrollably through him. He sank slowly into the worn leather chair at his desk, overwhelmed by waves of guilt and sorrow he thought he'd long since conquered. The knowledge crashed through him, heavy and merciless, forcing him to face a truth he'd avoided for far too long. Determined to confirm his realization, Liam sought out a former colleague, retired Sergeant Daniel Fletcher, who now lived an hour's drive outside town in a secluded cottage overlooking a tranquil lake. Liam drove there the following morning, his restless night evident in the deep shadows beneath his eyes. Daniel Fletcher, now in his mid-50s, greeted Liam warmly at the door, his greying hair cropped close, his frame robust despite early signs of arthritis. Fletcher had always been a straightforward, reliable man, one whose honesty Liam trusted implicitly. As they settled on Daniel's front porch overlooking the peaceful water, Liam tentatively raised the subject he'd come to discuss. Fletcher confirmed Liam's suspicion immediately, his voice gentle yet firm. Caleb was indeed Samuel Mason's son, left fatherless at 10 years old, struggling ever since with the weight of his father's heroic but tragic legacy. Daniel described Caleb as a boy who grew up idolizing his father, haunted by his absence and burdened by immense pressure to live up to Samuel's reputation. Hearing this confirmed, Liam felt his insides churn painfully, guilt pressing harder upon his conscience, now intensified by the knowledge of how deeply interconnected his own mistakes were to Caleb's ongoing struggles. Fletcher, sensing Liam's internal torment, advised compassion and forgiveness, but Liam left feeling more conflicted than before, unsure how such profound guilt could ever be resolved. As Liam grappled silently with these revelations, across town, Caleb Mason struggled to maintain any semblance of normality. Each day felt increasingly unbearable, dominated by isolation and public shame. Caleb's tall, once confident frame had begun to show visible signs of strain. His blonde hair grew untidy, his face now pale and gaunt, the dark circles beneath his eyes deepening from sleepless nights spent replaying the tragic event in his mind. He had always been earnest, kind-hearted, and eager to please, traits that had once endeared him to neighbors. But now, those same neighbors turned away when they saw him, whispering harsh judgments that wounded him deeply. The pressure of their collective condemnation forced Caleb to remain locked in his modest apartment, curtains drawn tightly closed. Despairingly, Caleb found himself questioning his very worth, overwhelmed by regret and an unrelenting sense of failure. He longed desperately to undo that single panicked moment, replaying it in his mind with tormenting frequency, agonizing over the irreparable harm caused to Emily and Liam, two people whose pain he felt personally responsible for deepening. In an attempt to escape his crushing thoughts, Caleb ventured out late one evening, walking aimlessly through quiet streets now grown hostile. He wandered into a local cafe he had frequented before the incident, a small establishment run by Anna Walker, a woman in her late 30s, with curly, honey-colored hair and kind, patient eyes. Anna had always been warm and welcoming, possessing an empathetic personality shaped by her own difficult past, including escaping an abusive marriage. She noticed Caleb enter, visibly distressed and hesitant, and quickly approached, gently coaxing him to sit and offering him coffee and comforting silence. Her simple act of kindness nearly brought Caleb to tears, breaking the fragile shell of composure he desperately clung to. Anna listened quietly as Caleb poured out his pent-up emotions, his voice cracking as he expressed remorse and self-loathing. Anna, though sympathetic, struggled internally, torn between understanding Caleb's humanity and witnessing firsthand the grief caused by his mistake. Her support, however cautious, became a lifeline Caleb clung to in his darkest moments, providing a fragile hope that perhaps redemption might still be attainable. Meanwhile, Liam returned home late that evening, still shaken by the knowledge he now carried. The weight of guilt pressed heavily upon him as he silently entered his home, determined to shield Emily from his inner turmoil. She sat curled up on the living room couch, staring blankly at the television, though clearly not watching it. Seeing his daughter's small, frail figure stirred Liam's resolve. He had to protect Emily at all costs, shielding her from any further pain. Carefully, he hid his troubled emotions behind a comforting smile, joining her quietly on the couch, gently reassuring her with his presence. Yet, inwardly, Liam's guilt gnawed relentlessly. He couldn't help but wonder if his own past mistakes, his flawed decisions and failures in command, had somehow indirectly led to this present tragedy, as though fate itself conspired to confront him with the repercussions of past wrongs. For the first time in years, Liam questioned himself deeply. Had he truly done enough to honor Samuel's sacrifice? Had he failed not only Samuel, but now also Caleb, whose desperate, mistaken action had cost Bailey's innocent life. These unsettling questions filled Liam with profound regret, deepening the chasm of guilt he carried silently within. Even as he sought to conceal these turbulent feelings from Emily, Liam recognized he had unwittingly become part of a tragic chain of events, each decision linking painfully to another, each choice haunting him with unrelenting clarity. The weight of these uncovered secrets pressed heavily on Liam's conscience, leaving him painfully aware that the line separating heroism from tragedy was far thinner than he had ever imagined. The atmosphere in the town quickly shifted from quiet compassion to tense confrontation. As days turned into weeks, whispers turned to shouts, sympathy transformed into anger, and the normally harmonious town fractured into opposing camps. At the center of the storm stood the local police department, a modest brick building on Main Street that had long symbolized safety and trust, but now became a gathering place for outrage. Small groups of residents, both young and old, began assembling daily outside its doors, holding placards demanding justice and accountability, their voices sharp with accusation. Among them was Linda Evans, a robust woman in her late 50s, known for her unwavering determination and forthright opinions. Standing nearly 6 feet tall, with tightly curled black hair speckled with streaks of grey, Linda possessed a naturally authoritative presence that intimidated many. Having spent years advocating fiercely for animal rights, Linda wasted no time in rallying others around her cause, organizing demonstrations in front of the modest brick police station, loudly calling for Caleb Mason's immediate dismissal. Her voice, loud and unyielding, echoed through a megaphone each afternoon, gathering supporters who held signs demanding justice for Bailey. Beside Linda stood her younger sister, Gloria Turner, smaller and softer spoken, whose thin, delicate frame and shoulder-length chestnut hair made her appear timid beside Linda. But beneath her gentle exterior, Gloria carried an equally fierce conviction, having rescued and sheltered abandoned pets throughout the years. Gloria's usually calm demeanor had been deeply shaken by Bailey's death, prompting her to speak publicly for the first time in years, voicing disappointment in the local police and, particularly, Caleb Mason. Together, the two women spearheaded the daily demonstrations in front of the small police station, joined by dozens of locals who carried signs demanding accountability for Caleb's actions. They called openly for his resignation, some going as far as demanding criminal charges. Their voices became increasingly louder, harsher, echoing through town like the distant rumblings of an approaching storm. Not everyone, however, sided with the vocal protesters. A smaller but equally determined group emerged in Caleb's defense, led by Aaron Mitchell, the local high school principal. Aaron was a distinguished-looking African-American man nearing 60, tall, fit, with neatly cropped salt-and-pepper hair and eyes that conveyed both strength and wisdom. Known for his measured and thoughtful approach, Aaron often wore neat button-down shirts and khaki trousers, projecting a dignified yet approachable presence. As a former teacher and mentor to Caleb, Aaron had seen firsthand Caleb's earnest dedication and genuine compassion toward others. Aaron argued fervently at town hall meetings and informal gatherings alike, urging the community to remember Caleb's humanity and vulnerability. He emphasized the pressures and uncertainties that law enforcement officers face, especially those young and inexperienced. His calls for empathy and patience drew both quiet nods of agreement and heated rebuttals, further deepening the community's divide. Adding fuel to the fire, the local newspaper, managed by a controversial journalist named Dennis Parker, published a provocative front-page article that inflamed tensions further. Parker, a wiry man in his early 40s with sharp, penetrating eyes and slicked-back, jet-black hair, thrived on controversy. His reputation had long been built on sensationalism, exploiting local drama for readership and attention. The headline of his latest article read boldly, "Young officer shoots war hero's daughter's beloved dog. Accident or reckless act." Parker's dramatic words painted Caleb as an impulsive, reckless officer whose incompetence had destroyed an innocent child's emotional stability and disrespected Liam's sacrifice. His inflammatory language ignited furious debates online and throughout local businesses, the article quickly spreading across social media platforms. Comments poured in rapidly, some deeply sympathetic to Liam and Emily, others vehemently critical of Caleb, labeling him incompetent and dangerous. This media-driven firestorm fueled the town's division, widening the rift and creating an environment of mistrust and bitterness. Within this charged atmosphere, local law enforcement also felt immense pressure. Sheriff Margaret Hopkins, who had led the town's police department for nearly 15 years, found herself caught in the storm's eye. Margaret was a formidable woman in her mid-50s, with silver-streaked auburn hair neatly cut above her shoulders, framing a face that was both stern and reassuring. Her clear blue eyes had witnessed decades of change in the community, and she approached her job with a level-headed fairness that had earned widespread respect. Margaret understood the pain and outrage, yet she found herself torn between public sentiment and the inherent complexities of policing. Privately, Margaret visited Caleb one quiet evening at his small apartment, finding him withdrawn, pale, and visibly worn down by relentless scrutiny. As she sat across from him, Margaret's keen eyes observed his obvious deterioration, his once bright demeanor now dulled by guilt and isolation. Caleb spoke quietly, barely above a whisper, eyes lowered in shame as he expressed his inability to escape thoughts of that fateful night. Margaret reassured him gently yet firmly, advising him to seek professional help, deeply concerned by signs of growing depression. Caleb nodded weakly, her visit both comforting and painfully humbling, highlighting just how isolated he had become. At home, Liam's frustration grew daily, exacerbated by constant community attention and unwanted scrutiny. Though he tried shielding Emily from the escalating tensions, he found it increasingly difficult. Emily's classmates had begun discussing Bailey's death openly, their comments sometimes insensitive or unintentionally hurtful. One afternoon, Liam met with Emily's teacher, Hannah Caldwell, to discuss Emily's declining performance in school. Hannah was a kind-hearted, patient woman in her early 30s, her warm smile framed by shoulder-length blonde hair, her blue eyes soft and compassionate. Hannah had noticed Emily's recent withdrawal and declining academic performance and expressed sincere concern. She spoke earnestly with Liam, gently urging him to consider counseling for Emily, believing professional support might help heal her emotional wounds. Liam listened attentively, recognizing the truth in Hannah's advice, even as he struggled internally with feelings of inadequacy, uncertain how to protect Emily from more pain. Liam's internal torment grew even more intense, the constant reminders of Caleb's tragic mistake intertwining painfully with his memories of Samuel Mason's death. As town divisions deepened, Liam privately blamed himself for the unrest, believing his past failures had somehow resurfaced to haunt both his family and the community. The simmering anger he harbored now intertwined with guilt, creating an emotional cocktail dangerously volatile beneath his carefully controlled surface. His evenings alone became filled with silent battles against these powerful emotions, punctuated by restless pacing in dimly lit rooms, desperate attempts to suppress darker impulses from consuming him completely. Meanwhile, Emily sensed her father's struggle despite his efforts at concealment, quietly observing the subtle changes in him, his occasional abruptness, the dark circles deepening beneath his eyes, and the heavy silence that now permeated their home. Emily found herself torn between the grief she felt for Bailey's loss and growing anxiety over her father's emotional state, desperately wishing for a return to the stability and warmth that had vanished from their lives. The protests outside the police station grew louder, more frequent, attracting regional news reporters eager to capture the mounting drama. Signs held aloft by angry residents read messages of condemnation directed toward Caleb, chants calling for justice for Bailey echoing loudly in the streets. Others held signs in Caleb's defense, urging compassion, highlighting the tragedy of both sides. Caleb watched helplessly from his window as neighbors he once served turned against him, unable to cope with their anger. At the same time, Liam stood by his window, observing the chaos from a distance, feeling helpless and trapped within his own internal conflict, increasingly aware that the events unfolding around him were reflections of his past decisions, past mistakes he could no longer ignore. The divisions had become painfully personal, each side unaware that beneath the public outcry lay hidden secrets and unresolved guilt, a silent storm threatening to unravel them all, pushing the entire community dangerously close to a breaking point. The days stretched into a quiet monotony within the Brooks household, each hour weighed down by unspoken sorrow. Liam moved mechanically through his daily routines, his mind preoccupied by unresolved guilt and frustration, often spending long hours alone in his study, struggling privately with inner demons from his past. Emily, still burdened by the loss of Bailey, navigated her days quietly, retreating to her bedroom whenever possible, the space serving as a solitary sanctuary from the chaos and tension that enveloped their community. One rainy afternoon, trapped indoors by a persistent drizzle tapping steadily against her window pane, Emily wandered restlessly around the house. She drifted aimlessly into the guest room, rarely visited since Olivia's death, its air heavy with the sweet yet faint scent of lavender perfume her mother had always worn. Feeling a sudden, overwhelming wave of nostalgia, Emily opened the antique oak wardrobe, standing solemnly against one wall, the hinges creaking softly, as if reluctantly surrendering its contents. Inside, neatly stacked beneath carefully folded sweaters and scarves, Emily noticed a small, leather-bound journal she'd never seen before, its edges frayed gently by years of careful handling. Curiosity piqued, Emily carefully extracted it, holding the worn journal reverently in her small, delicate hands, her heart racing as she recognized the graceful handwriting that could only belong to Olivia. Settling onto the soft, floral-patterned bedspread, Emily opened the journal slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as she absorbed the familiar loops and curves of her mother's handwriting. Olivia Brooks had been a gentle, compassionate woman, slender and graceful, with soft brown hair falling loosely around her shoulders and warm eyes always filled with kindness. Her voice had been a calming melody, capable of soothing even the deepest anxieties, and she had possessed an extraordinary ability to see goodness and hope even in difficult circumstances. As Emily read, her mother's wise, comforting voice echoed through each carefully chosen word, speaking tenderly of love, forgiveness, and resilience. Olivia's entries revealed private moments of reflection and vulnerability, each page infused with insights born from her quiet battle against cancer, a struggle she'd faced with dignity and courage, despite the heavy toll it took on her body and spirit. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she absorbed her mother's heartfelt messages, carefully woven with lessons about compassion, the importance of forgiveness, and how strength often arose not from holding grudges, but from embracing understanding and empathy, even when it seemed impossible. Olivia wrote explicitly about choosing to forgive those who hurt or disappointed her, describing forgiveness not as weakness, but as the purest expression of inner strength and love. Olivia's profound reflections resonated deeply with Emily, prompting her to reconsider the pain and anger she still harbored toward Caleb Mason, the officer whose tragic mistake had caused Bailey's death. That evening, filled with newfound resolve, Emily approached Liam cautiously as he sat quietly in his study, shoulders slumped beneath the invisible weight of exhaustion. Carefully, Emily expressed her wish to speak with Caleb directly, to tell him she forgave him for what had happened. Liam's reaction was immediate and intense, his face registering a mixture of shock, disbelief, and protectiveness. He questioned Emily gently yet firmly, attempting to shield her from further emotional harm. But Emily remained steadfast, calmly explaining her mother's words and the profound effect they had upon her heart. Liam, unable to argue against the wisdom of Olivia's teachings, reluctantly agreed to arrange a meeting, his expression tense and filled with apprehension. When Liam contacted Sheriff Margaret Hopkins the following morning to facilitate Emily's request, Margaret was equally stunned but moved by Emily's strength. Margaret quickly agreed to arrange the meeting, recognizing this act of forgiveness could help begin the community's painful journey toward reconciliation. Caleb Mason, meanwhile, continued to isolate himself, increasingly withdrawn and emotionally fragile. When Margaret visited Caleb's modest apartment to inform him of Emily's request, Caleb initially recoiled, convinced he was undeserving of such compassion. His appearance had deteriorated further, his once bright eyes now shadowed by persistent sadness, his lean figure gaunt from skipped meals and sleepless nights. Margaret spoke gently but firmly, urging him to accept Emily's invitation as a necessary step toward healing. Her encouragement, coupled with Caleb's deep respect for the sheriff, eventually persuaded him. Yet his heart remained heavy with anxiety, fear, and lingering guilt as the meeting approached. The day of their encounter arrived, clear and sunny, a striking contrast to the gloomy weeks preceding it. Caleb entered the quiet conference room at the police station first, dressed simply in jeans and a plain blue sweater, his hands trembling nervously as he awaited Emily's arrival. Liam and Emily entered shortly afterward, Liam's expression tense yet protective, his posture rigid with suppressed emotion. Emily, however, exuded quiet determination, holding tightly to her mother's journal as if it provided invisible strength. She approached Caleb cautiously, noticing immediately the fragile, haunted look etched into his young face. Taking a deep breath, Emily spoke softly but clearly, her voice steady despite the emotional intensity of the moment. She told Caleb she had read her mother's words about forgiveness, explaining that she now understood forgiveness was a choice, a powerful expression of love capable of healing the deepest wounds. Tears welled in Caleb's eyes, his composure breaking as Emily gently told him she forgave him fully for Bailey's tragic death. Her words pierced deeply through Caleb's layers of guilt, bringing relief and profound humility that overwhelmed him entirely. Liam, observing silently from the corner, felt his own heart soften as he witnessed the incredible courage and maturity his daughter demonstrated, acknowledging inwardly that her strength far surpassed his own. News of Emily's act of forgiveness quickly spread through the community, sparking fierce debates once again. Many residents expressed profound admiration for Emily's remarkable maturity, praising her courage and compassion publicly. Yet a vocal segment of townspeople cynically questioned Liam's intentions, accusing him of using his daughter's emotional gesture as a calculated strategy designed to diffuse tensions and regain public sympathy. Social media erupted anew, comments pouring forth, some hailing Emily as an inspirational figure, others criticizing Liam harshly, accusing him of exploiting his child's grief to influence public opinion. Amidst this renewed controversy, Caleb remained humbled yet conflicted, profoundly touched by Emily's forgiveness, yet tormented by guilt, doubting if he truly deserved such grace. Liam, meanwhile, privately grappled with these new accusations, deeply wounded by the implication that he had manipulated Emily's genuine act of kindness for personal benefit. Despite these external conflicts, father and daughter quietly drew closer, their shared experience of loss and resilience subtly strengthening the bond between them. The chapter concluded quietly, the controversy surrounding Emily's act of forgiveness continuing to ripple outward through the community, provoking both admiration and criticism. Yet, beneath this storm of public debate, Emily stood firmly by her decision, guided by Olivia's wisdom, determined to honor her mother's legacy through acts of genuine compassion. Caleb, deeply affected, began to question his own path forward, sensing that Emily's forgiveness might offer the chance at redemption he desperately needed. Liam, meanwhile, continued struggling privately, proud yet protective, grateful for Emily's strength, yet profoundly unsettled by the harsh criticisms directed toward him. In their small, fractured community, the power of forgiveness had been unleashed, capable of mending deep wounds or inflaming old resentments, leaving unanswered questions lingering heavily. Could forgiveness truly heal their divided town, or would mistrust and bitterness persist, irreparably damaging relationships still struggling beneath the surface? In the aftermath of Emily's profound act of forgiveness, Caleb Mason found himself at a crucial crossroads, grappling with internal turmoil that overshadowed every waking moment. Haunted by the community's relentless criticisms and the unshakable burden of guilt, Caleb came to a painful yet inevitable decision. He would resign from the police force. This choice weighed heavily upon him, deepening the lines etched into his youthful face, adding gravity to eyes already shadowed with remorse. Caleb knew that remaining an officer in the town had become untenable, his presence a constant reminder of trauma for those he'd sworn to protect. After submitting his resignation letter, Caleb sat silently at his desk, head bowed beneath the gentle hum of fluorescent lights, contemplating his uncertain future. His thoughts drifted toward memories of childhood, of his late father, Samuel, whose absence had left an emotional vacuum Caleb desperately sought to fill with noble aspirations of public service. He recalled vividly the pride Samuel had carried, a broad-shouldered man with sandy blonde hair and steady brown eyes, whose presence had brought reassurance and warmth to everyone around him. Caleb had always aspired to emulate his father's quiet dignity, but now his heart ached with the belief that he had failed miserably in that quest, tarnishing the Mason name. Determined to find redemption, Caleb sought a path that might allow him to atone for his mistake, something tangible that could reflect genuine remorse and commitment to healing. Ultimately, his thoughts turned to the local animal shelter on the outskirts of town, the North Haven Rescue Center, a modest yet thriving refuge for neglected animals run by Julia Hartwell, a woman in her late 40s whose unwavering compassion was well known in the community. Julia was slender and elegant, with striking silver-grey hair falling gracefully to her shoulders and expressive green eyes that conveyed both warmth and resolve. Her nurturing demeanor had comforted countless animals, her quiet strength providing solace to staff and volunteers alike. When Caleb first approached Julia, she regarded him with cautious sympathy, fully aware of his troubled reputation, yet sensing sincerity behind his request. She welcomed him to volunteer, allowing him the opportunity to rebuild trust slowly, a process Caleb wholeheartedly embraced. His first days at the shelter were physically exhausting yet emotionally therapeutic, spent cleaning cages, feeding anxious animals, and tending gently to frightened rescues. Each moment spent caring for vulnerable animals became a subtle yet powerful act of repentance, slowly restoring fragments of self-worth he'd lost in the wake of tragedy. As Caleb navigated this new path, Liam Brooks continued battling privately with the unresolved tensions weighing heavily upon his conscience. Unable to escape recurring thoughts about Samuel Mason's tragic death under his command years prior, Liam finally resolved to confront the situation directly. After days of hesitation, he decided to meet Caleb face to face, recognizing that their shared suffering demanded acknowledgement and closure. The meeting occurred quietly on a crisp autumn afternoon in a small coffee shop at the edge of town, a place chosen deliberately for its relative isolation from prying eyes and judgmental whispers. Liam arrived first, nerves taut beneath his composed exterior, his powerful frame seated tensely near the window, a steaming cup of black coffee untouched before him. Caleb, entered moments later, his movements cautious, almost hesitant, wearing a simple brown sweater and jeans that emphasized his lean, weary frame. Upon seeing Liam, Caleb froze briefly before gathering enough courage to approach. Their first moments together were tense and awkward, both men exchanging cautious, guarded greetings, acutely aware of the emotional weight hanging between them. Liam took the initiative, breaking the silence with a carefully chosen apology, not for Bailey's death, but rather, shockingly, for Samuel's. Liam revealed the hidden truth that had burdened him for years. The mission during which Samuel died had been compromised due to his flawed command decisions. Liam admitted openly his mistakes and described in painful detail the overwhelming guilt he had carried silently ever since. Caleb listened, stunned, heart racing as revelations poured forth, emotions conflicting between confusion, anger, grief, and unexpected compassion. Liam spoke softly but earnestly, emphasizing how Samuel's death had haunted him daily, shaping every subsequent choice he'd made. His voice cracked slightly as he shared intimate details, admitting candidly how Samuel's sacrifice had left an indelible mark, impacting his career, his family life, and ultimately even influencing his reaction to Bailey's death. Caleb absorbed Liam's words, initially overwhelmed by resentment toward Liam's previously unknown role in his father's demise. Yet, as Liam spoke, Caleb began recognizing something familiar in Liam's haunted gaze, understanding intuitively that Liam, too, was deeply wounded, forever altered by shared tragedy and guilt. Outside, the afternoon sunlight softened gradually, casting gentle rays across their solemn faces as they continued speaking. Liam expressed his profound regret, acknowledging openly how his errors had indirectly affected Caleb's life. Caleb, in turn, shared openly his own deep sense of failure, describing how Bailey's death had shattered his sense of identity and honor. As their conversation progressed, animosity gradually gave way to mutual understanding and respect, each recognizing the other as profoundly human, both victims of war's lasting scars, emotional wounds borne silently and privately for far too long. In that quiet coffee shop, surrounded by the distant chatter of unaware patrons and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, Liam and Caleb discovered common ground in shared vulnerability, each finally comprehending that forgiveness required strength and healing demanded courage. They parted respectfully, neither fully healed, yet both profoundly changed, their hearts lighter for having acknowledged truths previously hidden beneath layers of pride and pain. Back at the shelter, Caleb returned with renewed determination, his heart gradually lighter after the emotional catharsis shared with Liam. He spent hours tirelessly helping Julia and the shelter's dedicated staff, among them Zachary Price, a young volunteer whose cheerful demeanor and optimistic outlook brought a much-needed lightness to daily routines. Zachary, in his early 20s, was tall and slender, with messy chestnut curls and bright blue eyes perpetually sparkling with enthusiasm. Zachary quickly befriended Caleb, offering easy conversation and humor, subtly helping ease Caleb's lingering tension. Caleb found unexpected solace in these friendships, experiencing genuine camaraderie he thought lost forever, following his resignation from the police. Each animal he comforted, each small kindness he provided, brought a measure of peace, gradually restoring his sense of self-worth and purpose. At home, Liam also experienced subtle shifts in perspective, influenced profoundly by his encounter with Caleb. He began sharing openly small fragments of his emotional journey with Emily, their relationship deepening further through honest conversations that previously felt impossible. Emily, wise beyond her years, listened patiently, her gentle encouragement offering Liam genuine comfort, reinforcing his belief in the possibility of reconciliation and redemption. Quietly, father and daughter continued healing together, strengthened by newfound honesty and the acceptance of mutual vulnerability. Thus, Chapter 7 closed with both Liam and Caleb, embarking separately, yet connectedly upon their own journeys of redemption, each understanding clearly the painful consequences of past mistakes, yet determined to move forward through genuine acts of repentance and healing. Their paths, once tragically intersected by violence and grief, now converged through mutual understanding and compassion, quietly proving that redemption and forgiveness, even after profound tragedy, remained genuinely possible for those courageous enough to confront their deepest truths. In the months that followed, a gentle transformation settled quietly over the town, softening the sharp edges of anger and division that had dominated so many lives. Gradually, tension gave way to understanding, hostility softened into compassion, and a subtle healing began to knit together the frayed threads of the community. At the heart of this slow but meaningful change were Liam Brooks and Caleb Mason, who, after their profound encounter, decided to take a tangible step toward reconciliation and unity. Recognizing that their shared pain and regret could become a powerful force for good, they jointly proposed an idea to Sheriff Margaret Hopkins and community leaders, a new fund dedicated entirely to helping animals in distress, named simply and poignantly the Bailey Legacy Fund. This initiative, inspired by Bailey's tragic story, was intended not only to memorialize a beloved dog lost too soon, but also to symbolize hope, forgiveness, and renewal for the entire town. After weeks of delicate negotiations and heartfelt conversations with local officials, Margaret, still the calm, steady presence she had always been, her short auburn hair now touched more deeply with silver strands, enthusiastically championed the proposal at the town council meeting. Margaret spoke passionately, her steady voice filled with sincerity, highlighting how the fund could promote healing in a community still quietly aching from recent tragedies. The council members unanimously approved, convinced by the sincerity of Liam's request and the evident remorse Caleb had consistently demonstrated through his volunteer work at the animal shelter. News of the fund's creation spread quickly, warmly received by many who saw it as a sign of genuine reconciliation and hope for the town's future. Among the earliest supporters was Joanna McCall, a warm-hearted woman in her early 50s whose bustling cafe located near the town square had long been a gathering spot for locals. Joanna was known affectionately by everyone for her generous hospitality, contagious laughter, and a ready ear for listening to others' problems. Short, comfortably plump, with soft, rosy cheeks and dark curls streaked gently with grey, Joanna always wore floral aprons, bustling energetically between tables, serving homemade pies and comforting cups of tea. Joanna eagerly agreed to host fundraising events at her cafe, turning it into the unofficial heart of Bailey's legacy. Her enthusiasm inspired others, including Mark Delaney, the town's quiet librarian, who rarely spoke publicly, but now stepped forward to organize charity book fairs, where gently used books were sold to raise money for the fund. Mark was a reserved, slender man nearing 40, his neat dark brown hair always precisely combed, his thick-framed glasses emphasizing his scholarly appearance. Usually shy and introverted, Mark's newfound determination surprised many, his quiet passion and dedication becoming integral to the fund's early success. Meanwhile, Emily, still tenderly grieving Bailey's absence, found herself drawn towards the hopeful spirit the fund represented. She watched thoughtfully as her father and Caleb collaborated, their once fractured relationship now marked by a cautious but meaningful respect. Their shared efforts brought a gradual sense of peace back into her life, slowly easing the persistent ache of loss. Recognizing Emily's still fragile emotional state, Liam decided one crisp Saturday afternoon to take her to the North Haven Rescue Center, where Caleb and Julia Hartwell warmly welcomed them. Julia, graceful and compassionate as always, gently led Emily through rows of animal cages, each one containing a hopeful, expectant face looking eagerly toward visitors. It was there that Emily first saw the small, chocolate-colored Labrador puppy, timid and alone, huddled shyly in the corner of its cage. The puppy, barely 3 months old, had soft brown fur and eyes as warm and inviting as freshly brewed coffee. Julia explained quietly that the pup had been abandoned and was discovered frightened and starving near a roadside a few weeks earlier. Emily immediately knelt beside the cage, her heart instantly connecting with the vulnerable little dog whose cautious eyes mirrored her own lingering sadness. Without hesitation, Emily turned to Liam, her eyes brightening with quiet certainty, softly declaring she wished to adopt the puppy. Liam's heart swelled at seeing the gentle spark returning to his daughter's eyes, understanding immediately the powerful symbolism the small dog represented. After completing the adoption paperwork, Emily named the puppy Hope, choosing the name deliberately as an expression of optimism, rebirth, and a new beginning, a living symbol of healing after so much loss. In the following weeks, Hope quickly became inseparable from Emily. The small puppy's joyful spirit and playful antics gradually melting away, lingering sadness, filling their home once more with laughter. Liam, quietly grateful, observed their blossoming companionship warmly, recognizing how profoundly important Hope had become in Emily's journey toward emotional recovery. Their house, previously quiet and somber, now echoed with the sound of playful paws padding energetically across wooden floors, bringing smiles back to faces that had known too many tears. Caleb, continuing his volunteer work at the shelter, regularly checked in with Emily and Liam, their bond strengthened by genuine friendship, born from shared experiences of pain and forgiveness. Caleb's own emotional scars began to fade gradually, his volunteer hours at the shelter serving as a powerful, redemptive path, helping him reclaim a measure of self-worth he had believed irreparably lost. 6 months after Bailey's death, the town held an official inauguration ceremony for the Bailey Legacy Fund at the town park. A bright, clear spring day filled with gentle warmth and blossoming flowers. The event attracted hundreds of residents who gathered quietly beneath large shade trees, the scent of blooming lilacs and fresh-cut grass filling the air. Sheriff Margaret Hopkins spoke first, her steady voice warmly addressing the crowd, recalling Bailey's tragic death as both a heartbreaking event and an opportunity for communal healing and understanding. Liam followed, standing tall and dignified, his usually reserved demeanor now tempered by genuine humility, as he expressed heartfelt gratitude for the community's support. Caleb spoke last, nervously stepping forward, voice initially trembling but gaining confidence as he shared openly his profound regret and genuine appreciation for the town's collective generosity and forgiveness. The crowd, initially reserved, gradually warmed to Caleb's heartfelt sincerity, many visibly moved by his humble words. The ceremony concluded quietly, with Liam, Caleb and Emily standing together beneath a large commemorative sign bearing Bailey's name, symbolizing unity, healing, and the profound power of forgiveness. As evening approached, Liam, Emily and Caleb walked slowly along the quiet paths surrounding the park, Hope trotting happily beside them, tail wagging joyfully. The trio spoke quietly, sharing reflections on the profound changes each had experienced, recognizing how much they had grown individually and together through tragedy and forgiveness. Their gentle laughter mingled quietly with the sounds of distant birdsong, the peaceful silence broken only occasionally by Hope's playful barking. Liam glanced thoughtfully at Emily, noticing the quiet confidence and strength she had gained, profoundly proud of the remarkable maturity she continued demonstrating daily. Caleb, though still deeply affected by past events, felt a newfound peace, grateful beyond words for the second chance afforded him through acts of compassion and forgiveness. As the sun began dipping slowly below the horizon, casting soft golden hues across the park, Liam, Emily and Caleb paused, standing together beneath the gently rustling branches of an old oak tree. Hope, sensing their reflective mood, sat quietly at Emily's feet, eyes bright with curiosity and trust. In that peaceful moment, as dusk gently enveloped them, each felt quietly assured that healing, though slow and often painful, had finally begun in earnest. United by mutual understanding, forgiveness, and hope, their small circle stood together, quietly resolved to honor Bailey's legacy, embracing the belief that love, empathy, and redemption remained not only possible but deeply necessary for healing hearts and communities alike. The chapter concluded gently, the soft evening light enveloping them warmly, a quiet promise that despite tragedy, hope, and forgiveness could forever remain the most enduring legacies, offering paths forward toward brighter futures.